Thank you. Ah, well, before I launch into the Sunday lesson, I want to share a couple things with you. First, thank you. The last 2 weeks, of course, we were out. I did the national convention up in Kansas City near Unity headquarters, and then I took a week of vacation time to just relax. And it's been years since I've had just a vacation really week to relax, so it was good to recharge the batteries. And I hope you enjoyed the 3 guest speakers we had covering the last 3 Sundays, with Terrence, Luann, and Esther being in here. Now, there's something else I wanted to share with you, which was kind of interesting getting back in the office this week. Over about the last 6 weeks, we have discovered that there has been someone cruising the neighborhood and stealing checks out of mailboxes, both incoming checks and outgoing checks. We've discovered this because our vendors and creditors are saying, "Where's your check?" And then we check with the credit union, and it's cashed. They've altered the checks and cashed them. One of those checks was a $2,300 insurance premium that we sent out to our insurance company. So at this point, not only has over $3,000 been extracted by our account, but we still have to pay the bills. Now, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. We can get frustrated, we can sulk. I don't want to do that. What I do want to do is to know that in the divine economy, nothing is ever lost. If for some reason, this money appears to be gone, let us know that what's going to come back to us multiplied, from the windows of heaven. So what we just need to do is a little bit of prayer work, just looking at, first of all, just praying that, everything's okay here, everything will be provided, and also just praying for the individual or group that's doing this right now. We discovered it when we went to the post office to report that we think this is going on, and there was someone else in line who lives 3 blocks out there had the same thing happen. So that's it. The steps we're taking were, 1, someone has invested in a nice, big, sturdy locking mailbox out there now, so they'd be able to shove the mail in but can't get anything out. So we're probably going to be installing that here tomorrow. Also, we're going to make sure that we do as much electronic payments as possible. We kind of have these checks and balances in place to make sure that not one person could print a check and sign it, but we're going to just arrange to make as many electronic payments as we do. Obviously, no more outgoing mail in the mailbox, that kind of stuff, the wise stuff to do. But if you have mailed us a check in those last 6 weeks, you might want to check the canceled check with your bank, too, just to see whether it got to us or somebody else altered it. So yes, there's a nice deep breath, and good morning. As you see, the title of the lesson is, how to escape the belly of the beast. And of course, it's become, part of our vernacular, but of course, the story a lot of people think of when they're thinking of the belly of the beast is Jonah, being swallowed by a whale. Now, our Bible consists of 66 books, 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament, and now Bible scholars, have become more inclusive. It's no longer the Old Testament, it's the Hebrew Bible, and then the Christian Scriptures. And instead of BC, we say before the Common Era. So it's BCE, and then instead of AD, after the Common Era. So in the year 90 ACE, a group of rabbis got together after Jerusalem had been pillaged and came up with the Hebrew Bible, like say the Old Testament. And then in 325, another group of bishops got together and came up with the New Testament. And the Old Testament is grouped into 3 groupings. One is called the Law, and then the Prophets and the Writings. So when you see Jesus or other people in the Bible talk about the Law and the Prophets, they're talking about these groupings of books. The Law is the first 5 books there in the Bible. So, with that out of the way, Jonah is one of the prophets, and it can't really be called a book or even a booklet. It's more like a pamphlet. It's about just 2 pages long in the Bible. And what I want to do today is just take a longer passage like this or book and just unspool it for the symbolism of it. So it's just long enough that I can't read it word for word, but I'm kind of going to go through what's going on here, and you'll see It's an entertaining book in some ways, and it can be frustrating in other ways. But Jonah. Jonah, the book opens with Jehovah saying to Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh because they're all caught up in wicked ways, and I want you to tell them to repent, to change their minds, and do things in a healthier way. If they don't, I'm going to destroy the city in 40 days. Now, Jonah, after getting this guidance, decides, I don't want to do that. Nineveh is the capital of Assyria, our enemies. I don't really feel like making a 3-day trip northeast to Nineveh. In fact, I'm just going to go hide from God. So instead, I'm going to go to the Mediterranean Sea, hop a boat, heading northwest, and everything will be fine. God can't find me. Well, the boat is engulfed by, in some versions, a hurricane, but just a bad storm. And the crew on the boat's like, okay, everybody get up here on the deck, pray to your gods, let's see what's going on here. And it's discovered that Jonah is ignoring guidance from God, and it's his fault. And Jonah says, it's my fault, throw me overboard. That'll take care of everything. And at first they're like, no, we can't do that. But then they realize they can't get back to shore, so they agree and they throw him overboard. And the storm stops. And Jonah's there in the water, just lamenting, saying, oh, God, take me, man. I wish I could die right now. But instead of that happening, a huge fish comes up behind Jonah and swallows him. Now, it's interesting because it doesn't say whale. It says a great fish prepared by God. And we'll talk a little bit more about the symbolism of that in a minute. In fact, biologists have now discovered that a whale couldn't possibly swallow a human being, but there was that sense of like, well, it has to be a really big fish for this to happen. It's like, well. So, Jonah is in the belly of the whale, the belly of the fish, the great fish. And he prays a prayer of gratitude. It's like, thank you, God. I thought I was going to die. I was so stupid. What I'm going to do is, to follow what it is you want me to do. Here I am, Lord, use me. And I'm going to do better in the future. And so Jonah is in the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. And the fish takes him back to where he started, spits him out onto the land. And Jehovah once again says, okay, go to Nineveh. And sure enough, he does it. He goes to Nineveh and he preaches and tells people, how they have to end their wicked ways. And he is shocked to discover that they listen to him. And they actually change their ways of doing it. Even the king says, you're right, we've got to change our ways. And so they do this, and the city is saved. And Jonah's looking around feeling frustrated. He leaves the city and goes out onto the edge of the city and saying, God, I really wanted to see these people wiped out. I mean, they're our enemies. They're doing bad things. They should have been punished. And he just kind of sits there and sulks, and God makes this plant grow up and give him shade out there in the desert, outside of Nineveh. And then Jonah falls asleep, and the next morning he gets up, and he's still got the poor attitude. Like the daily word today. It depends upon your attitude when you start out. And God decides, well, I'm going to put a worm into that plant that's giving you shade. The plant will die, and sure enough, the plant dies. And Jonah starts to lament, oh, what happened to my wonderful plant? I can't believe my plant is dying, and I'm baking here in the sun. And Jehovah, scolds Jonah. Says, well, isn't it interesting that you're more concerned about the plant than you were about 120,000 people in Nineveh? And then the book ends. So, there are a number of ways we can interpret Bible stories. Some look at Bible as literature. Some look at it as history. There are some historical facts in the Bible, but there are other things that have been proven not to have happened. But for unity, we recognize that whenever there's a narrative story, there's this embedded symbolism in it. And this Metaphysical Bible Dictionary was a 10-year project back in the 1920s to look at every person, every place in the Bible, find out what the symbolism is. So let's take a look at that. All of the characters in the Bible represent some aspect of ourself, and every place in the Bible represents some aspect of ourselves, some place within us. So the Jehovah Whenever you look at the Old Testament, you see there's this, it'll be the word the Lord, L-O-R-D in capital letters. That's a replacement for the word Jehovah that's in there. Now, Jehovah is our earliest understanding of how God could be. And if you've ever seen the play or the movie Inherit the Wind, at one point they point out, well, we were made in God's image, and human beings decided to return the favor and make God in our image. So suddenly we're dealing with a God that wants revenge and is happy. But then suddenly, Jesus comes along and says, forget all that. God is always good. God's not going to hurt you. And it was a whole new way of looking at God. Now, Jonah represents any time that we're faced with the kind of dilemma he is. We get the guidance, we know what it is we need to do. And it may be a pain to do it, or we just don't want to do it for some reason, or we have some bigoted idea, and we decide not to do it. And we decide, and like Jonah, he figures he can run away from God. Well, if God is everywhere and everything, including in every cell of our body, that ain't going to happen. But that was his mistake. Especially, like many of you, I came from another tradition. I grew up Catholic. Suddenly I discovered unity. I said, oh, wow, now this stuff all makes sense. And yeah, when I discovered unity in early '87, I'd come to classes and I just wanted to learn as much as I could about unity. And I wanted to apply it in the physical world, and it worked. Most of the time. There are other times, though, where it just doesn't seem to be working. Or there's other times where, you'll get up, you'll be in a good mood, and then all of a sudden, you'll get on your computer and you look at some headlines, or you'll turn on the news, and you're like, oh, I can't believe he's doing that. I can't believe she's not doing that. What's wrong with the world? Or some other thing will surface, like someone will tell you that someone's stealing checks from our church. And on Wednesday, I come back and I'm well rested, and it's kind of like, what? God, you got to be kidding me. So we get these dilemmas that come into our life like this. There's an inner struggle that happens. It's like, well, I know the truth. Why isn't the truth manifesting in the world? Now I'm going to take the liberty of just jumping to this ending of the story after the city is saved and he's out there in the sun. Jonah has just gone through a very powerful experience, like many of us have at some point in our life. And here he is praying to God, if you just save me, I will change, I will do things much better. But he falls into old ways. And one of those old ways is thinking that if somebody does something wrong, they have to be punished. They have to suffer because they did something wrong. Remember, this was centuries before Jesus taught, love thy enemy and pray for those who persecute you. It stalls our spiritual growth when we get into that kind of a tit-for-tat attitude. We make the mistake of thinking that, well, God isn't handling justice in the physical world. God is handling justice in the physical world. There are things that we do here in the physical world as far as our court system and laws, but in the end, nothing escapes the divine economy. That's why I say I'm confident that, yes, by all means, we'll have the resources that we need, not only for this week, but also for these coming months. So, Jonah, at the very beginning of the book, gets this clear message from God: go to Nineveh. He decides to go to Tarshish. Tarshish is, in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, it says purely intellectual reasoning before it's been spiritualized. Nothing wrong with the intellect, provided it's spiritualized, that it follows spiritual guidance rather than coming up with its own bright ideas. So here he is. He gets the guidance and decides to just go to the intellect and rationalize why he shouldn't do it. Nineveh represents natural animal instincts ready for spiritual instruction. We've all kind of got that kind of negativity within us, but it's kind of like, it's okay. We can change that. There's the recognition of our divine nature and the possibility of vigorous growth. All of those things, that's what Nineveh represents. We're told that it's a city of 120,000 people. Whenever there are these numbers in the Bible, you look at the symbolism of it. 12, the 12 powers, the 12 disciples, the 12 signs of the zodiac. The 12 is the spiritual gifts that are within each of us that just need to be called forward. Now, if you're not familiar with the 12 powers, the 12 disciples represent faith, imagination, will, understanding, zeal, power, love, wisdom, order, strength, renunciation, and life. These are the 12 primary divine ideas, and then they cross-pollinate and generate all of these other divine ideas. You know in your heart, what is good. So the heart of the lesson is the best known, where people say, well, it's when it was swallowed by this whale. Well, like I said, it's not a whale, it's a fish. Now, there's a storm at sea. We all have our storms. We have turbulence coming up in our life. A lot of times we stir it up ourselves, but suddenly we're reacting to outer negative appearances, and there are a lot of people that do this and think it's just fine. I know when we were up in Kansas City, Carla and I were visiting an old friend, and it just seemed like the whole day we were spending with her, she was complaining the whole day. And not of anything of real consequence, but it's like sometimes we just get caught up in that. Things are not happening according to my preferences. So, we react to these outer appearances rather than saying, okay, God, show me the good in this. Show me the good in this. So it can be national or international events, but generally we're talking about just what's going on within us, our personal, private existence and experience. So, what's the challenge? What's the storm in your life? Where's the storm? Is it in your health? Is it in your finances? Is it in your human relationships? Your career? Your personal growth? Jonah got very discouraged, thought he was going to die, wishing he was dead, thinks he'll drown, but he's not allowed to drown, because God always gives us a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth chance, and a fifth chance. God is ready to give us another chance. So we get this great symbol, this fish. Now the interesting thing is, every time there's a fish in the Bible, it's describing an idea that surfaces from our subconscious mind, the ocean. A fish will surface, you'll see it, and then it just disappears. Now usually, though, every place in the Bible, the person is catching the fish. In this case, the fish catches Jonah, swallows Jonah. What's that all about? Well, what it's about is that sometimes when we are feeling so overwhelmed, like Jonah was, a great fish will come to us, a great idea, and we're like, oh, God, I can't handle that right now. And that's where we go wrong. We get this great idea, and we rationalize not allowing it to happen because we don't feel like we've got the strength or the courage. But you don't have to have the strength and the courage. Sometimes you can say, okay, God, I surrender to this idea. Let it swallow me. Let it incubate me for 3 days and 3 nights. The symbolism of 3 days and 3 nights, the moon disappearing or appearing to disappear in the sky for 3 nights. It just dwindles down to nothing, and then suddenly it grows back. So yeah, those 3 days are as long as it takes for you to be ready to move forward with the idea. And then we move forward with the idea. When you or I need help in any of the storms of our life, God makes available to us these divine ideas, the divine download that comes to us. We recognize which ones are right for us, which ones we definitely need to follow through on. They help. The deliverance all comes through these ideas. So don't wait to feel until you're ready. Just be willing to embrace it and let it swallow you. Surrender your troubled and endangered self, your anxiety to divine mind, your attention. Let it just engulf you, engulf us, and move forward. I'm going to have Duncan put up a couple of things you can walk away with just to remember. Lessons from Jonah. Whenever we're in trouble, pray. Yeah. I did a lot of prayer work this week. And I called Silent Unity, our 24/7 prayer line. It's like, okay, here's the situation. God, show me the good in this. Release your plan. A lot of times we come up with a bright idea, but then suddenly God presents us with a different path we need to walk that day, or that week, or that month. So be willing to release what it is you think, you thought you had to do, when you recognize that there's something more important. Let the divine idea take over. Let it take the lead. Let Spirit take the lead in your life. Follow through on the ideas. What are we being guided to do? What am I being guided not to do? What am I being guided to say? What am I being guided not to say? something wonderful will happen. The divine idea will use every channel possible to express as our help, our deliverance, and a perfect solution. And the beauty of divine ideas is that they're not complicated. In fact, they're pretty simple. The greater the idea, the more simple it seems to be. You know, divine ideas like health and prosperity and peace and enough money to pay the bills and have enough to spare and to share. We cross-pollinate those 12 ideas and recognize through our intuition what it is we need to do. Any divine idea comes with it. Everything that we need to have it come to fruition. Our closing story is from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News.